So welcome everybody to our webinar today on World Fish Migration Day, uh, looking at a project we did removing a barrier to fish migration at the Ballinglen Bridge in Aughrim in County Wicklow. So this gives you a sense of the Avoca Avonmore catchment here in south western County Wicklow. And as you can see, it's a huge catchment. And this is from a study that Inland Fisheries Ireland did back in 2012 in collaboration with the Heritage Office in Wicklow. And basically, anything that you can see on this map that's shown in red is where fish passage is impeded to some extent, and anything that's in blue is open. So the Aughrim is a very important part of the whole system, as you can see, and the Ballinglen catchment is circled in the dark blue down on the bottom left-hand corner, and the barrier to all of that part of the catchment is at Ballinglen Bridge. So that's what we were setting out to tackle. So this gives you a sense of what the barrier is. It's a beautiful old bridge with this beautiful cut stone granite bridge apron, but it's beautiful to our eyes, but not great if you are a small trout or eel or lamprey or something like that trying to get upstream to migrate. And things like these cause a problem for our aquatic species. Now, see if this will work. This just gives you a little sense of the barrier before we did the work. And so how do you go about removing a barrier? Well, it takes a whole team. So we had a series of partners in the project, ourselves and East Wicklow Rivers Trust, Inland Fisheries Ireland, LAWPRO, Wicklow County Council, National Parks and Wildlife Service, RIVUS Ecological Engineering, and the local landowners, and very importantly, something as simple you wouldn't have thought of, but our bridging loan funders. So it's quite a challenge to make something like this happen. So back in 2021, we got funding from the Inland Fisheries Ireland Salmon and Sea Trout Rehabilitation, Conservation and Protection Fund, basically to see could this be a barrier that could be overcome. And following a competitive tender, we engaged Rivus to look at the barrier, to design a fish pass, and also to include passage for lamprey and eels. And in order to do something like that, you actually need a whole load of different assessments done. So these include things like a flow duration curve, an ecological impact assessment, an appropriate assessment screening report, and also in the case of Ballinglen Bridge, a heritage assessment because the bridge is actually a protected structure. And then working in partnership with Wicklow County Council was absolutely brilliant because as project partners, they then approved the planning for the project under a Part 8 process. So it really makes a team, it needs a team to make these things happen. And here's starting out just with a bit of topographical survey, trying to work out all the levels. And you can see that the flow on the river there is quite strong, even at low flows. So this is what Rivas designed, which is a rock ramp. So it's a series of essentially like small, um, almost like a weir structure, but made of rocks that slowly lift the water levels up to get them to a point where the fish can start to migrate. So we had a design. Here's gives you a section of cross sections of the river. So quite a lot of detailed drawing and engineering thought going into the design of something like this. And then in 2023, we had an indicative budget of what the work was going to cost, and we went back to the IFI's funding for doing the work, and the work began. Now, if you're planning work on a river, you don't generally think of starting in a quarry, but this is where the project construction actually started. So you can see Alan here literally picking out the individual boulders that he wants to use to build a rock ramp. And before the work started, there was some electrofishing done and capture of any fish or lamprey or anything that could get trapped during the works, and also of interest just to see what's there. And IFI had previously electrofished this section of the river, and there was no sense of a lot of stuff upstream, which is what we're trying to achieve. So we're very grateful to Roger Boyd, who owned the land next to the river, and he gave us a small corner of his field where we could set up our equipment and store all the materials. So you need space to do these things and space to work and access to the river. So the first thing that happened was the bottom of the bridge had actually been eroded out, and a lot of rocks had fallen out of it. So these gaps were hand packed back in with stone, and then a whole anti-scour toe put in place at the bottom of the structure, and you can see it there. And then Alan started to build the foundations for each actual ramp going up to the bridge. So you're trying to overcome a barrier of, I think it's about 1.2 or 1.4 meters. So what was designed was a series of these kind of small weirs, and each of those gradually raised the level of the water. So you start off with your kind of ramp foundation work, and then your larger rock armor weirs are going to be placed and bedded into these ridges of stone. And of course, everything was pre-washed, and all the stone was stored on a tram liner, because you're trying to make sure you don't introduce silt into the river. And the works obviously have to take place, during the period you're allowed to do in-stream works, which is typically kind of July to September. And as each row of the weir stones get placed, there's a lot of work with checking levels as you go. Um, and as the work happened, you can see that the water levels had started to build, and the last thing to actually be constructed was the lamprey and the eel pass, and the alarms were going off on the track machine at that point, because it kept saying like there's water levels around me. So something you wouldn't necessarily have originally thought of. Well, I wouldn't, but Alan, of course, does these things in his sleep. He's just brilliant at it. And you can see the bridge apron here, the first of the rock weirs there, and this is the eel and lamprey pass, which has gone in. So at the moment, there's still a little lip there, and this was in very, very low flow conditions. So we were kind of looking at it going, now we need a good flood. And the whole system that Alan has put in place is designed to actually, take big floods. The rocks can move. That's part of how a river works. And in between each of the rock weirs, there's really little pools, and then we put in big rocks there. So there's loads of little hidey places for fish and increased habitat for other creatures. So that's just looking downstream, and you can see each of the weirs gone in place, and this gives you a sense. Just this was the end of the first day, or the last day of work, I should say. And this is we got a good flood on the river, and you can see you actually can't see any barrier to fish migration there at all. So it's turned out really well. And it's a beautiful bridge. This is from upstream looking down through the bridge. And again, you can just see like in higher water when the fish are actually migrating, there's no longer a barrier there. So it takes a team, and brilliant to have so many people on board. I'd really like to honour Jennifer Whitmore, TD, who's one of the founding members of the East Wicklow Rivers Trust, and Luke Dray, who was our previous chairman, because it was between them and Donal O'Keefe from LAWPRO, who came up with the original project, and working with everybody in Wicklow County Council. You can see Jonathan Sexton here from the environment section. This is Justin Ivory from LAWPRO, and here's Alan and myself. So it's great to work in a positive way, because we hear so many things about nature loss, and here's an action that we could actually take and deliver on. So thank you so much to everybody, particularly to the directors of the trust, because we had to get a bridging loan through Clan Credo to actually fund the work. So we had to draw down that money. It's quite a big ask to go to your chairman and say, will you sign a legal contract with your name on it and your home address for a loan of 120,000, and trust that we're delivering this work. So we couldn't have done it without everybody supporting it. The team in RIVUS who designed and built the rock ramp, Alan, Paul, Brian, and Joe, were just fantastic. As I mentioned, Luke, Jennifer, and Donal were the ones who kick-started the project. Within IFI, we had fantastic support from Josie Mahan, Roisin O'Callaghan, and Ken O'Neill and Liam Gavin, and they funded and made the whole thing actually possible. And then within Wicklow County Council, to have the help of Mark and Mary and Deirdre Burns it just made the whole thing run really smoothly. There was also good support from MPWS, and particularly all the local landowners who agreed to help with the work. And George Lee came down and covered the project for RTE News, which was great, because it brings awareness about this type of thing to a wider audience.